Mrs. Wilson was dizzy as slapped by Jenna. She really did not expect that she had said so many insults to Jenna before that Jenna did not do anything to her. Unexpectedly, when she showed her weakness, she accidentally touched her inverse scale. Although Jenna has no culture, she is indeed a filial daughter. At first, her mother was forced to commit suicide by taking medicine. After hearing the news, she rushed back from her husband's house. At that time, her mother was very sick and hopeless. In the hospital, Gina's mother told her very weakly that she wanted to go home, saying that she was uncomfortable in the hospital. Jenna knew that she was going to die. When she was dying, all she wanted to do was to save some money for her family, and didn't want to stay in the hospital for fearless treatment. She wanted to take her mother back to her in-laws' house, be good for a few days, and let her walk through the last part of life. But her mother-in-law strongly opposed it, especially her mother-in-law, who yelled at her on the phone, saying that if she dared to pick her mother back, she would not even enter the house herself. The younger brother, who is afraid of his wife, is unwilling to let her mother go back because it is unlucky for her to die in her own home. In the end, Jenna could only take her mother back to her old house that had been abandoned for many years. In the old house, Jenna tried her best to wipe her mother's body with warm water, put on clean clothes, and made her a bowl of noodles with eggs. After the mother ate the bowl of noodles, she held her hand and said to her contentedly, "Good girl, Mom will sleep for a while," and then she never woke up. That day, Jenna cried all the tears. After her mother entered the soil, Jenna beat her younger sister-in-law and was sent to the detention center. It was also because of her filial piety that when she heard that Elaine was very unfilial to Mrs. Wilson, she felt sympathy for Mrs. Wilson and hated Elaine at the same time. Generally speaking, this is a vulgar, sloppy, and uneducated peasant woman who has always respected her deceased mother and awe of human nature. Although her temper is aggressive, she is not a bad person. She could tolerate the insults Mrs. Wilson had put on her, but she couldn't tolerate even a slight offense to her mother. Mrs. Wilson only said that by dying in a better room, she can guarantee a good fate in her next life. It reminded her of her mother, who had died in a dilapidated building. She always felt that her mother was loyal and kind-hearted, though poor and down for her life. However, her fate is so awkward, she has never enjoyed a blessing in her life, and finally was driven to ruin by her daughter-in-law. She also felt that such a mother, even if she died in the worst room in the world, God has eyes, she would have a good fate and enjoy a lifetime of happiness in her next life. And what Mrs. Wilson said just now, inadvertently, not only denied her consistent firm belief in her heart, but also blasphemed her mother's holy and great image in her mind. Therefore, she couldn't bear it and slapped Mrs. Wilson. At this time, Mrs. Wilson, covering her face, looked at Jenna resentfully, although she was very annoyed in her heart, but at this time, given her 10,000 courage, she did not dare to do anything with Jenna. Regnar's subordinates said in a cold voice at this time, "We are here this time. It is Mr. Regnar's order to empty the assets in this villa. Mr. Regnar means that in the future, except for the hard decorated parts, as well as the bed, except for the large pieces of furniture such as the sofa, all other household appliances, all valuable furnishings, and the good wine stored in the basement must all be emptied, leaving nothing." When Mrs. Wilson heard this, she suddenly felt desperate. At first, she was worried that she had no money. She could sell the household appliances in the villa, especially the wine in the warehouse in the basement, which could sell for at least 1 million, but she didn't expect that such a rich person as Regnar could even do this. She was worried about this in her heart, and before she was ready to make a move, his people had already found it. Mrs. Wilson said bitterly, "You can move away from the little brothers, home appliances and so on, but please keep the wine for us. After all, we like to drink a few drinks occasionally." The leader sneered and said, "You're FC King almost out of food, and still thinking about FC King drinking? With that energy, you should study how to make money and make a living." After finishing speaking, he immediately said to a few people around him, "Start moving. Don't leave any valuables." "Okay, boss." Several subordinates immediately agreed, and then began to search the villa for a while. They even carried a flatbed cart specially used for moving house, put all the valuables in the cart, and pulled out all the bits. Mrs. Wilson didn't dare to make any trouble, she could only watch them constantly move the things in the villa, not only moved all the wine out, even the TV on the wall was also taken down. What's more, the kitchen utensils, pots and other items in the kitchen were all taken away by them. Mrs. Wilson choked and said, "Brothers, please keep the cooking pots and pans for us," the man said coldly. "These are all kitchen utensils imported from Germany. One pot costs tens of thousands. Keep them for you. You will sell them all in 2 days." Mrs. Wilson cried and said, "No matter what I sell, I can't sell the pot," the man said disdainfully. "We don't care about this. If you want to cook, you can find a way to buy another pot." After that, he checked in each room again to make sure that there were no valuables left. Then he said to his men, "You first put everything in the car." Several subordinates went out one after another, and the person said to Jenna again, "You will live here steadily in the future. Mr. Regnar has only one requirement of you, that is, you must not go to the house of Ms. Elaine next door to find any trouble with their family. Otherwise we will never be merciful." As soon as Jenna heard this, she nodded quickly and said, "Don't worry, I will never trouble Elaine. The trouble with Elaine before was all because of Mrs. Wilson, an ungrateful old lady, so I will definitely not do it again in the future." "Not anymore." The man was satisfied and said, "Okay, don't you want the bedroom on the 3rd floor? Go and take it quickly, let's go first," Jenna said excitedly. "Okay. I see. You go slowly." After the group of people left, Mrs. Wilson sat on the ground and cried, "Oh my life, why is it so bitter?" Wendy also cried out and said, "Grandma, Regnar is too much. He clearly wants to play with us." Horia said at this time, "People, Mr. Regnar, may not really want to play with us. Originally, he wanted to arrange a few helpers for our family. Unexpectedly, your grandma would offend them to death when she came up. Now there are no other helpers. Now, there are 3 more enemies." Mrs. Wilson asked furiously. "Horia, you slut who doesn't obey women's way, dare to point fingers at me?" Horia had been fed up with the old lady's arrogance for a long time. Seeing that the old lady was angry with her, she immediately became angry and cursed, "You dead old lady, don't deceive too much. Do you really think you are still Mrs. Wilson? You are now very poor and utterly impoverished, and your FC King here with me. What the hell I owe to the Wilson family?"